Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of the Extravaganza with yours truly, Captain Lou, and of course, my tag team partner extraordinaire, Mitch Bernstein. We are less than 24 hours now until the end of the trade deadline. And so some moves being made. Mitch is happy about his. We'll let him talk about it here shortly. But before we do, just want to let everybody know that the show tonight is brought to you, as always, by let's get the right caption up. There we go. Tonight's show brought to you by SeatGeek, the official secondary market of the Extravaganza. You want to go to a Phillies game, including the weekend set with the Tigers. Use the promo code Captain Lou and you'll get $20 off that purchase. It's that simple. It's free money. Go to SeatGeek. And again, the official secondary market of the Captain Lou Sports Network and the Extravaganza. Mitch, how are you?
I'm really good, sir. I'm really good. Happy about this news that just came out about 10 minutes ago. Philadelphia Phillies I don't know how to pronounce it. I mean, his first name, Joan, I don't know. We'll find out later. Duran from the Twins. He is a classic closer, is what the Phillies needed by far. Dombrowski got it done. He had to give up Mick Abel, who is going to be he's trending to be a really decent major league pitcher, and Eduardo Tate, who's a single A catcher. So a real good trade for the Phillies today.
Oh, I think it's a great trade. I was kind of hoping that the Tigers would make a play on him, but the Tigers got Paddock already from the Twins, and so I don't know if they would make another trade in division, So I'm happy for the Phillies, happy for maybe that'll help them get to my bet of over 91 wins.
You have other reasons. You're not I understand. You want them to get there.
No, it's a good trade for them. And you have every reason to be happy. They're knee deep in the pennant race or division race anyways, and looking for a playoff berth, which I think they'll get.
Yeah.
But it's it's fun. It's a fun time. This is the fun few days.
Yes.
With the anticipation of the trade deadline and trying to get that last piece. Although now in August you can still make a trade, but the player has to clear waivers, right?
Yes, that's correct.
That you have until August 31st. I'll never forget. Here's a blast from the past, Mitch. When the Tigers won the World Series in '84, they made a trade in September, although he couldn't pitch for him. Dickie Knowles.
Oh, is that right? How about that?
He ended up getting a save for him and pitched in the eighth inning a couple of times. But yeah, that always sticks out to me when I think of that rule in September.
Interesting. Yeah, not much goes on after that. And by the way, Dickie Knowles is still with the Phillies organization.
Oh, okay.
He's like a community service rep.
Nice.
Or he works with the team in some capacity.
Yeah.
He's still there with them. Yeah. And how about so we were looking after last week's show to this day coming up tomorrow, and the biggest name was Emmanuel Clase, and 2 to 3 days later, he comes up in a gambling investigation. Yeah. He's off the table. Oh, my gosh. I'm sure all the teams started scrambling at that point. Going, okay, who's next?
What's going on in Cleveland with that? That's their second player, right? That's under investigation for that.
Yeah. It's how can you be so dumb? Now, I was listening to, I forget who it was, one of the ESPN guys today, and he was talking about, with all this gambling, now, no way excusing the player.
No.
Because, he said he can't even go, his contract says he can't even walk through a sports book. That's how strict it is with these guys, right? How can you be so dumb? Now, again, it's an investigation. They don't know for sure.
Right.
Nobody knows for sure, but they probably wouldn't be doing this investigation without any evidence.
Well, it's I hope it's just circumstantial. I mean, it's like I've said before, and I've ranted on a couple of mine. If that was Shohei Ohtani or Tariq Skubal or you name it, that pitches and threw one in the dirt 10 feet in front of home plate, would they be put on leave too? The first pitch of the third inning? I mean, I don't know. But you mentioned it. The gambling rabbit hole is, a million miles deep now. You just, like the news with Gilbert Arenas, he was arrested this afternoon for running a gambling ring, a sports gambling ring and poker. It's just, wow, it is intense out there right now.
It's it's these guys thinking that maybe that they won't get caught.
Yeah.
As a professional athlete, I don't know that you can take that. You should take that chance.
Oh,
I don't understand it.
I don't either.
You can gamble all you want. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
These guys, you're going to sacrifice for your family's money, your money that you're making for. I don't know. It's hard for us to understand because we don't do that, right? We're not involved. We can't be involved with that.
I mean, I know addiction's out there with anything. I mean,
yeah.
There's reformed alcoholics and all that, and I get it. And I don't know if it's that, but how many times have you and I even talked about Pete Rose? And it says right when you walk in, you open up the door to any locker room, gambling is forbidden.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. I just here my headset's kind of goofing around here. I'm going to switch something here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it really is something you have to make good choices, and I just don't understand how these athletes can make these choices and think they won't get caught and possibly immune to what anything bad that could happen.
Well, Mitch, it's one of those things where, a lot of times these athletes, and I hate to paint them all under the same brush, but they get away with it. They get away with things that you and I would not normally be able to because of their athletic ability when they were kids. And, they've been put on this pedestal. They get to where they think they're impervious to any punishment. And, it's like you said, they're looking at throwing away generational wealth for their families and their families' families. It's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to feel sorry for him, but hopefully it's nothing. I hope it is.
Well, and like you said, this could be an addiction thing.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. We don't know enough. They have enough to investigate. That's where we are now, and we'll see where it takes us.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens. And people also forgetting, and I keep forgetting, going back to the Phillies, Alvarado will be back. Now he won't be available for the playoffs, but he will be back. Yeah. So I don't know if he's allowed to throw. I mean, I'm guessing he's allowed to throw while he's in suspension, but he can't do anything with the team. So if he can be in decent shape when he gets back, and that's a heck of a 8-9 setup man and closer situation. That would be awesome.
And it's funny, the talk in Cleveland is now they're going to be sellers. Quan could be on the block by this time tomorrow.
Oh, he's on the block for sure. Yeah.
Shane Bieber, even though he's not pitching right now, I mean, he was lights out. Him and Clase were lights out against Detroit in the playoffs. But, I mean, they're still only 9.5 out, depending on what they do tonight. But,
yeah, that's a big need. I mean, my whole crazy thing is if you're 10 out on August 1st, you're not going anywhere.
Agreed. Hey, speaking of all this trade deadline talk, you and I are going to do a special extravagant few minutes tomorrow night, 7:00. The trade deadline will be passed. We'll break it down and see what it looks like for Major League Baseball. Sounds like a plan, eh?
That sounds good. I'm excited about it. It's going to be interesting to see how many of these deals go down between now and then.
Oh, I know. I'm going to have the MLB channel on tomorrow when I get home from work, definitely, to keep up with it, because I think you're going to see some scrambling.
Looking forward to it.
Yes.
Looking forward to our guest tonight. Has Mark made it in yet?
Not yet. He hasn't gotten the call in the bullpen yet. He's not in the green room. So I know I got an email from him.
Okay.
Earlier today, said he got it. So
okay, good.
Yep. Okay. Just waiting on him.
Looking forward to talking to Mark about Marq Evans about this man. This is Dick Perez in his younger years. He iconic artist, Diamond Kings. I would be surprised if you talked to anybody in the card business that didn't know about. You said Diamond Kings, they would know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, speaking of the bullpen getting a call, I don't know if he's right-handed, but he just made.
Oh, we're going to bring him in. We're going to bring him in.
Yep, there he is. Let's bring Marq Evans in. There we go.
I'm a righty.
Got it right. Okay.
Marq, how are you, sir?
Good, guys. How you doing?
Oh, I am so excited to talk to you. I forget where I found it. And I was reading about it, I guess, about the movie, and then contacted you. And I said, oh, my gosh. I think the next day I went on and watched it. You, my friend, did a terrific job with that.
Thank you.
There are two, and I'm not going to spoil it, not one, but two poignant parts of this movie that, Lou, you have to watch this.
Okay.
Marq does a great job with, and we'll get into this in a second. I just want to give you a little background of Dick's life and his journey. And a couple of areas of interest that we'll talk about are, when it became Perez Steel, number one, and number two, did he do anything? Did he do any drawings or paintings for his family? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Marq, I so enjoyed that. Look, when I first opened a Donruss card and saw this, I was like, oh my gosh. These are just so good. And there are sports artists around. There are a ton of them now, and I love every one of them. But when you look at these cards, Marq, the detail is phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, you look at trophies, even the plaques that came out for the Hall of Fame. I mean, they're close, but they're not exact. These are exact pictures of paintings of these guys. So it's amazing. And I wanted to ask you, what was your inspiration for doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up collecting those cards. Every time I got money for, mowing a lawn or whatever it was, I was going to the card shop and getting baseball cards. And, I don't remember. So I like 87 was probably the first year as a young boy where I really got into it. The Diamond King started in 82. So I wasn't like already collecting and then saw this new thing. When I got into collecting, they would have already been 5 years, the Diamond Kings. All I remember is those were some of my favorite cards. And I love how they looked. And I love that they were oftentimes my favorite players, and so those cards were very meaningful to me as a kid, but I never really thought about them, and I didn't think about who's the artist or anything like that until a couple of years ago. My son got into baseball and got into collecting, and so we pulled out my old collection. And as we're going through them, we came across a lot of the Diamond Kings, and those cards in particular. No other cards really, but those were the ones that took me back to my youth, and I just remembered them so vividly. And so my kind of internal question was, well, what's the story with the artist? I hadn't really thought that when I was a kid. And so went to his website, dickperez.com, which is an amazing website. I got lost on there just for hours. I mean, all of his art's on there. So that's where I found out that, not only did he do the Diamond Kings, because if that's what it was, then that would have been like, oh, cool. No, I know a little bit more about these cards and that guy, but it wouldn't have been enough for me to want to pursue, 2 years of making a film about the guy. But I saw all of his work and saw that literally he'd done thousands of baseball paintings. The paintings spanned the whole history of baseball from the 1800s until today. He's still painting. And his story, going from, coming to Harlem by himself on an airplane after a family tragedy, and learning the language of, he didn't know English, learning English, falling in love with baseball. New York had Mickey Mantle and Duke Snider and Willie Mays all at the same time when he's this young boy. And so his story, and then that leads all the way to being the, official artist of the National Baseball Hall of Fame for 20 years. And so all of those things combined, I thought he's got a great story of somebody that, a lot of adversity at a young age that reached the pinnacle of a career. And that also because of his work that I could kind of do a little bit of a history of baseball through the film as well too, through his work, which was also an excuse to be able to show more of the work. I mean, there's no baseball being played in the film other than like maybe some little league baseball. Right. There's no professional baseball. That's all represented by his work. And so which was something, that I wanted to do. So that's where it all started, just kind of rediscovering those Diamond Kings and, being a little kid again.
An article I read today, a little quote from the gentleman. He mentioned that he respected you. And he said it's got to be more than just the cards, right? It's more about the history of baseball.
Like when I pitched Dick for the movie, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. So, the timing was good. I had a movie that had just come out called Clay Dream, which is about an animator named Will Vinton who created like the California Raisins and other characters and built this big business, and then he lost it all. I don't want to give up too much to who he loses to, a famous person. And so that had just come out and was doing really well. And so he, Dick looked up, he's like, oh, this like, I think it was it was just opening in theaters in New York. And so, and so what I told him was like, hey, we connected and we hit it off on the phone right away, but we kept it casual. I just said, I'm going to be in New York. Why don't I bring the camera and we'll shoot some interviews. And I had some ideas of what to shoot. We'll spend a weekend together and we'll see how it goes. And if we click and if we're getting good stuff, I didn't tell him this, but like, as long as you're good on camera, then we'll keep going. And that's what happened, and that was the beginning of a good friendship. We didn't know each other before that.
Right.
And one of the things that he had said early on and repeated throughout the process, which was amazing, is that, Dick would say, well, as an artist, I don't want anybody telling me what I can or can't do with my art. And so I want to make sure that you as an artist know that as well too. It's your film. He didn't try to dictate anything. We would collaborate on things and I would ask him, I didn't want to like force him to do anything that, was not true or whatever, but he never said no to anything. And that was awesome because that's pretty rare with documentary to really have somebody with that point of view
that really wanted to collaborate as opposed to here's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Right?
That can happen. And even, and so, and that certainly was the case with some of my previous films where it wasn't as easy of a collaboration. Mm-hmm. And so, and again, he was up for anything, even things that he maybe didn't know, like, where's Marq going with this? He trusted me, which takes a little while, right? You've got to build that trust. But once you build that trust, that I had a reason, to do whatever it was. And one of those things, I'd appreciate we don't give it away too, that, the ending of the film, but like family members painting and stuff like that. He had me pushing him to do some of these paintings that maybe he otherwise probably wouldn't have done.
Interesting. Yeah, we won't give that away. So I'm an emotional guy. So those two parts of the film actually brought a tear to my eye. So it was really cool.
Yeah. And those, and so, people listening will, hopefully watch the film and probably know, what we're talking about. And those were two things that I didn't know about in my research. Like in documentary, you research like crazy. You try to know everything you can that's publicly available on the topic. But then you've got to be open to discovering new things along the way. And both of those things were not, stories that were on his website or anything like that. It had to come from spending time together, having these conversations, and listening. And then again with him, being willing to go down that path, which they end up being like both kind of like the emotional backbone of the film in a lot of ways, and certainly the emotional payoff.
And I think that grabs people. I mean, it really is. If you're invested, you're invested in this throughout the film, which I definitely was, and I know card lovers and people who watch it are. And then all of a sudden, those things hit you. I mean, it was great. I love that stuff. So let's talk about, wasn't necessarily, so these cards on the back say Perez Steel Gallery. So who's the Steel and what's that about?
Yeah, so Frank Steele was a huge collector first. Frank and his wife Peggy Steele. They were this a couple that loved baseball and got into baseball card collecting, baseball memorabilia, really. And an early piece in their collection was an original Allen Ginter card, one of the oversized cards. I'm drawing a blank right now on the player. It was a Pittsburgh Pirates player. And that was like an early piece in their collection, and they were collecting. And Frank and Peggy had Dick and his wife over at their house because Dick at the time was working with the Philadelphia Eagles. Before baseball, he was doing some football art. He was doing a lot of the Eagles programs and art like that. This would have been in like 77, 78. Mm-hmm. And Frank and Peggy Steele shared an office with the Philadelphia Eagles. And they had a mutual friend that was the general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles at the time. And so he introduced them. They had dinner, and Dick was just looking around at all this memorabilia, and he saw that Allen Ginter card, and they had it framed on the wall. He pulls it off the wall, and he says, "Why don't they make cards like this anymore?" Mm-hmm. And Frank said something to the effect of, "Well, nobody paints like that anymore. If you could paint like that, then I would go door to door and sell them." And Dick was like, "Well, I can do that." So Dick at the time was kind of, he was working with the Eagles. He didn't have this like ambition to be this iconic baseball painter, but that really started it all. And and Frank Steele had a connection to the Hall of Fame. He knew from kind of a previous career as a stock trader, knew Ed Stack, who became president of the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And so he contacted Ed Stack and said, "Well, why don't we do a Hall of Fame licensed series of these art cards?" Because they didn't have anything like that. And Ed Stack said, "Sure." And so they did these Perez Steel Hall of Fame art postcards, which started in 79, I believe. So that was before, I was not aware of those cards at all when I started mm-hmm. making this movie. I became aware of them during this, and that they were very popular cards. Very successful small business now for Frank and for Peggy and for Dick. They were, each set was, they produced 10,000 limited edition, but still 10,000 of each. And they, would sell them out like crazy every single set. And so, great story of like, this American small business and things like that. But that's really what started putting Dick on the map. And then ultimately in 81, when Fleer sued Topps for, claiming that they had a monopoly, the courts and then Don Russ piggybacked off that. The courts allowed Don Russ and Fleer to start making baseball cards, and Don Russ knew nothing about baseball. So they hired Bill Madden, who was a writer for the New York Daily News, to basically run Don Russ. And he had reviewed those Perez Steel art postcards and thought they were amazing. So he thought maybe we can bring that into Don Russ. And so 1982, first Diamond Kings come out as well. And they were off and running.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, we both know it's so iconic, so great, especially the first time you look at them and go, "Oh my gosh, look at the detail. Look at this is a real person like right in front of me." What was it like visiting his house, his home, his studio?
Really cool. I mean, so, Dick has had, what you might think of as like super legitimate art studios before, both in, like he had a big home in Philadelphia where he had a studio, and he had separate offices at times and stuff. He's now in Brooklyn. He's been there for maybe 15 years, and his basement is his studio, mm-hmm. and it's just full of paintings and paint. He's just always working down there. And so that was awesome. First of all, it's just a really cool place that he's got in a nice area of Brooklyn. And so that was just, fun going there. And we spent, decent amount of time there and got to know a lot of the surrounding restaurants and,
that's always good, right?
Getting to eat afterwards and everything and grabbing lunch and all that. But it was also something where going there in the living room, there are a bunch of paintings of certain family members and locations that they've traveled to. He's got some Italy paintings that he did. It's all a bunch of paintings that he did of things that aren't baseball. And then you go downstairs and it's just like baseball, sports and hundreds of books, reference books that he has and all things like that. It feels like this is the studio of an artist that paints baseball.
Yeah. Yeah, just I can't imagine going into a place like that and then probably not wanting to leave. Wanting to
Yeah.
continue to look at everything that he's done and he's doing, and he's still doing it.
Still doing it. Yeah. In the movie, we see him paint an Aaron Judge painting of his record-breaking home run.
Mhm.
The only painting that he's got that's baseball, I think, upstairs is, and you can see it in the movie, and it's actually referenced. It's a Josh Gibson painting, and
Okay, right.
which was used, I think, on a Topps baseball card in the like mid-aughts or something like that. And it's his wife's favorite painting, so it's one where
That's cool, yeah.
they've never wanted to sell it or anything. Like, it just means a lot to them. I think eventually it'll probably end up at the Negro League Baseball Museum, but not while they're living.
While they're here, yes.
They love it too much.
I'm sure Bob Kendrick, is like, awesome job. Keep it.
Yeah.
That's what Bob's like. And it sounds like Dick is just so down to earth. Just, watching the movie, he's just really happy continuing to do what he's done with these iconic, cards. I mean, I love this one because of the blue background.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just, when I saw this one, I was like, oh man, look at that. Ken Griffey Jr. in the blue background.
And I think that was probably a year where right before that, for several years, he had these really wild backgrounds, which spoke to his art design. He was like a graphic designer, is what he studied in college. And because, it's hard to be a successful painter, to make a career out of it. And so he didn't really think that would be possible. So he thought, I can get a job as a graphic designer. So you would see that on a lot of those earlier Diamond Kings. And then he started going to more of these portraits and Griffey's my favorite player of all time. I think there's 4 Griffey Diamond Kings. And yeah.
Do you have this one?
Oh yeah.
I figured you would. If you didn't, I would have sent it to you. 92.
Yeah.
That is. Oh, look what else. I got another Griffey. So here's your
that might be my favorite. I mean, I remember not liking that set of Donruss, not the Diamond Kings, but the border, the red.
Yeah. The red, yes, the red border, yes.
But I always loved that card. And now in hindsight, I don't know, the background, the portrait with the action figure, that might be my favorite Griffey.
Yeah, and I'm looking, and what I don't do myself, which I should, is look at more detail. And again, I see him right there, but he puts the follow through of the swing right next to him, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. What in terms of making the film, how long did it take?
It's about a 2-year process from start to finish, which for like a feature, an hour and a half documentary, at least for me, is really fast. My 2 previous films were like 5-year projects. And in fact, though, I was looking at the time when I started this for a project that I could do relatively quick and relatively, inexpensive for, compared to most films, because like I had, for the past 6 months, I was pitching 3 different projects that were all like this close to being greenlit by Hollywood, and they were taking forever and they weren't happening, and it was frustrating. And so I just thought, well, what's something that I could just make and not have to rely on the system. Right. And so when I came up with this idea, I thought maybe this could be it. And actually I was thinking, one of the things that takes a lot of time in documentary, two things. One, if you're chasing a story happening in real time and you just got to wait for it to happen. Right. That can take a long time, which sometimes you do have to follow that for years. But for the most of this story took place in the past. Obviously, there's certain elements that were present day that you see. But and in that case, what takes a lot of time is if you're interviewing a bunch of different people all over the country or all over the world, it takes time and money. Right. Because you got to have all these travel costs and everything, and just takes time to get into people's schedules. So what I thought I would do is do a film where all my interviews were just with the subject. So I wouldn't interview anybody other than Dick Perez. And so that's how it started.
Okay.
Pretty quickly, I edited like 20 minutes together over the course of, a month or 2. And I realized that we've got to hear from other people. We've got to hear from some other voices. But even still, I wanted to keep it very small and make sure that everybody that we talked to really had a purpose and really could contribute to the story and keep that number small, just, for budget and for time purposes.
Right.
So it ended up with, I think we only interviewed 5 other people. His wife, who originally, wouldn't have thought she was going to be in the movie, but I just witnessed them together, and I was just inspired. I was, wanted to share their love story. And
I was going to ask you, I was going to, sorry for interrupting. Yeah, I think that's an important piece for what her role was in his life, right?
Yeah, and I love the fact that they met. What does he say? Like, we met in May and we were married by October, and they've been together for over 50 years now. And just being, spending time with them, I thought I want this to be in there. I want to share this. It's the kind of relationship that I hope my wife and I will continue to have. And the movie that I'd done previously, the subject had 4 wives and was kind of working on the 5th. And so it was like a total contrast with that. But when I told Dick that I was like, I think I want to interview Lou, his wife, and he goes, "You ask her." And he didn't want to ask her, and so I did, and she was down for it, and gave a great interview that I think is important for the film. And then Peggy Steele, Frank Steele's wife, who was part of the Press Steele Galleries, very important person in the story. And beyond just the interview and the story and that you see in the film, has been just an amazing supporter of the film. She's still very active at the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, and so that led to a lot of led to a screening there at the Hall of Fame. It led to us shooting some stuff at the Hall of Fame, so that was great. Bob Kendrick, who we talked about from the Negro League Baseball Museum. Bill Madden, who was very integral in the whole Perez story, and then. Is that it? Who else do we interview? That might be it. I'm missing somebody.
We won't tell them, or we'll come back and tell them.
John Thorne, the amazing official historian in Major League Baseball. Yeah, he was I think so great in the movie.
And Joe Posnanski wrote the script, and the name of the narrator again?
Yeah, John Ortiz.
Yeah,
great actor. Yeah,
he was good.
Yeah. And he's just a huge baseball fan, so the performance was authentic, and so we had this idea, or I had this idea pretty early on, to have an on-camera narrator surrounded by some of Dick's work that we could project, so it'd be changing at all times. And partly it was a device to show more work, just to show off like how much work Dick Perez painted. And so, we have these four panels behind the narrator who's on camera, and they're switching based on what he's talking about.
Right.
And so we see, hundreds of additional paintings because of that. And so these scenes that are kind of intercut, and eventually they kind of tie together with like Dick's story.
Right.
At first they're a little bit separate, and then as we go, they work in. So one of my producers, Michelle Quisenberry, her cousin was Dan Quisenberry. And so, and Joe Posnanski, when he was the writer for the Royals, covered Dan and the family and knew all of them very well. And Michelle, my producer, met Joe, I think maybe at Dan's service, and had stayed in enough touch to say, well, we should get Joe Posnanski for this movie. And Joe thought we were going to ask him to do an interview because he shows up on a lot of baseball movies because he knows everything about everything.
Right.
And but I knew, I was like, but he doesn't really know, I don't think he like knows too much about this story. So it would be one of those interviews that I kind of hate in documentaries, where it's like, this person's just in there because they're a name, but they don't really like know the story. So I wasn't interested in that, but what I was interested in was maybe he could write the narration that we're going to have an actor do. And so we talked to Joe. He loved the idea. He was on board. That was fun working with him. I was making like some of these scenes, I'd kind of slotted in where they were going to go and what they'd be about. Other times, a lot of times he would watch just the rough cut and would kind of say like, right here, here's something that I would like to say. And so we'd make some space for it, and then just kind of figure that out as we went. And then John Ortiz, who, his very first movie was Carlito's Way.
Oh, wow.
Pretty good debut film. And, and he's always been known as this great actor, great character actor, but he's having more of a moment kind of in the last few years. He was in American Fiction, which was up for the Oscar a couple years ago. And then he did Bad Monkey opposite Vince Vaughn, was a big show for Apple. And so he's been a star in like some big stuff lately. And then he does the Diamond King. The way that came together is he was next door neighbors with one of my best friends and their friends.
Gotcha.
So he was just told him, he's like, hey, my friend's doing this movie and you should talk. And we did. Went from there.
A lot of intertwining relationships.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Mark, listen, it's a great movie. I encourage anybody and everybody who's involved, who is at least seen one Diamond King card, and there's a ton of you out there, to watch this movie. And it is streaming. I know I found it on Amazon. Streaming all over, right, Mark?
Yeah, Apple, Amazon, and Google Play, or even YouTube to rent or to buy. I think it's like $4.99 to rent.
$4.99. Yeah.
$12.99 maybe to buy. And then it's also available on Tubi, Tubi for free, but there's ads. So
gotcha. I would recommend
spend $5 and watch it
down there and do it. It's just worth it. It is worth your time as a fan of baseball and arts to do this. Mark, listen, thank you for taking the time. It's an absolutely phenomenal movie. You did a great job. I am so happy that I found you. And I hope it continues to grow in the realm of baseball documentaries.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. I mean, my whole thing is like, I just want as many baseball lovers as possible to know about the movie, and same thing. I hope it, the response has been great, but I hope it continues to grow as well. So
I think it will, and I hope, like you did with your son, found those cards. Hopefully, there's a bunch of those dads out there still that go, oh, look at this, and then find this, because that would be really interesting.
Yep.
All right, my friend. Phillies are now losing 3-2 to the White Sox.
But you did get the Twins closer that I was hoping the Mariners, my team, would get.
Yes, and I just found out the Mets got Helsley from the Cardinals. Why? I don't know, because they got Diaz.
The deadline's tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow, yeah. Lou and I are going to talk about the trades tomorrow on a special show. And your favorite team is?
Seattle Mariners, only team ever to go to a World Series.
Yes. Hopefully sometime before,
Yeah, every year we think, maybe this year, if we can just add Eugenio Suarez at the deadline, we got a chance.
We'll see. All right, Mark, thank you again for coming on. Thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And good luck, continued success with that documentary.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, we got Dennis warming up in the bullpen. I think he's another right-hander. See if I can go 2 for 2 on this one.
All right, let's see.
Let's bring him in. Dennis, was I right? Are you a right?
Yes. I'm a right-hander.
All right.
I guess you could say WRITE hander.
Good one.
Bad joke.
I like it.
Dennis, how are you? Thank you for coming on.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's great. I appreciate your patience. I had to cancel on you that one time, but I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for the book. As you know, Lou, I told you, I've been telling you for a couple of weeks. This is, Dennis, when I got it, and thank you. I read it pretty quick, and that's abnormal for me. But I continued to get intrigued by all of the research that was done and all of the information that you have in there, and obviously the history of this team, as you see I'm a fan of, which made it all that more exciting. Obviously, I was born in '55, so didn't really get into the Phillies until early '60s, and we're going to talk a little bit about the parallels between the 50 team and the 64 team,
right,
which drove me absolutely crazy, crying, literally crying watching it in New Jersey. I think it was the Met. I was on a fuzzy channel 3 in New Jersey, watching the Phillies or the Mets playing somebody. If the Mets won, the Phillies were out, and I think it was the Cardinals. I don't know what it was anyway, and they won, the Mets. And I was like, oh my God. I was so excited watching the papers every day. My team was going to win the pennant. They're going to go win the World Series. They had whatever game lead with so many games to play. It's like, yeah, we're in. we're not. We didn't. But
And
so
one of the guys responsible for making a big contribution to knocking them out was Kurt Simmons.
Kurt Simmons, go figure. Yes. Oh my God.
Who they got rid of for nothing.
Irony at its best. Oh my gosh. So let's start with folks. If they haven't read the book yet, Phillies fans, what motivated you to do this? I would like to start from the beginning and find out why did you do this book?
Well, even as a kid, I was always fascinated with baseball history, and so I kind of knew pieces of Phillies history. I knew they had an all 400 hitting outfield in the 1890s and still didn't win the pennant, and I knew that they had only been to one World Series prior to 1950 and only two prior to 1983 or 1980, I'm sorry, and hadn't won a World Series. Had lost almost every World Series game they'd played, almost all of them by one run. And of course, you had the Eddie Waitkus attempted murder. And what I look for are interesting stories that give you room to explore different themes. And I was thinking about the Whiz Kids and how they're famous, even though they lost the World Series, but they had a nickname. They were almost treated as if they were champions. And the only other two teams I could think of that really fit that bill were the Impossible Dream Red Sox, the 67, and the Go-Go White Sox of 59. And it sort of made me think about, okay, how did they build this team? And then why didn't it win again when they were young, when they won? What happened? What is that window for a dynasty? And why do some dynasties happen and some don't? So it's kind of looking at that. It's kind of looking at players who have an identity that's tied to one team, that everyone in their obituary was noted as a Whiz Kid, and what that's like. And I love beginnings and endings. So you'll notice the book is constructed much as the beginning is really the history of the team itself, which is a fascinating history. There's a lot of amazing stories the Phillies have. They're one of the most interesting franchises ever, leading up to William Cox, who was just recently, along with Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson, reinstated to baseball after he was kicked out after 1 year as owner. And then it kind of has the building of the team. Then the middle part of the book is really the 49-50 time frame when they finally had a winning season and finally and won a pennant. And then the rest of the book is really the aftermath, why they didn't win again and what happened to them, and exploring all those themes that I talked about. So, I had done a biography of Lefty O'Doul previous to this, and he, of course, played with the Phillies in one of the real down periods in 1929 and 30. So I had a little taste of that. And so I think it just seemed like, in the end, it was a really interesting story, and I hope it's interesting to everybody else. But the Phillies make it easy because they have an interesting history and a lot of colorful stories, and there were a lot of colorful players involved. You don't often have your best pitcher ends up MVP whose personal pitching coach is an undertaker. You can't make that stuff up. So.
No, you can't. Plus the fact that they, as you mentioned, and we all know, they were not a good winning franchise. I mean, I forget what the year was, the first professional team or baseball team with 10,000 losses, right? But so it's one of the things that you talk about and write about in the book is how the history not only of the team but of ownership and of Major League Baseball at that time, which is great because I didn't follow that. And it was good to learn and good to read about. Very interesting stuff.
And I think it explains why they grabbed the city like they did. If you don't understand that history, even if not all of you lived through it, it's just that's kind of key to why. If you want to know why they captured the city's imagination, understanding that long, frustrating history, I think, is important.
Yeah, I mean it does, and it does come together when I was reading it again in my head. Yeah, it helped me understand more about the entire reason why they were bad, and then again, you explain how they became good at some point, and then again, it wasn't just the players; it was ownership, it was money, it was all sorts of things. What did you find most intriguing about this Phillies team history?
About their history?
Yeah.
I just think the ownership groups that they had over time were very interesting. You know, you started out with Al Reach, who was a sporting goods magnate and had some money, and the teams were fairly good, and the attendance was fantastic. I mean, they generally were in the top 2 or 3 in attendance, even though they didn't win any pennants in the 1880s and 1890s. And then the next owner comes along. Well, they have the whole thing where Nat Blageway ends up jumping the team, and the owner, the co-owner with Reach, sues to keep him. And he's got to stay in New Jersey, can't play in Pennsylvania, play in the rest of the American League because he jumped to the American League Philadelphia franchise and all of that. And then, you know, just kind of the series of owners and how they just didn't have owners with the means or the money. And they had owners like Horace Fogel, who wanted to basically bring down baseball rather than really, and although actually he laid the foundation for the first Phillies world champion, but he wanted to rename the team the Live Wires, and you know, and you just have all these fascinating stories, you know, where the Phillies were trying to steal signals, all the Astros, but doing it by basically having their third base coach given electric shocks as he stood in puddles of water with an electric box from a buzzer done from the outfield. And it's just some amazing stories. And of course, there's, you know, the famous Baker Bowl stories. And, you know, I think all of that was interesting.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to pick out one thing.
Gotcha. And also at the time, the Athletics were in town.
Right.
And so talk a little bit about that dynamic between the Athletics and amongst those two teams, the Athletics and the Phillies.
Well, that kind of gets into the subtitle of the book, which really the publisher had a lot to do with choosing that. And some people ask about that. And it's very interesting because the A's almost from the beginning, when they came in and stole a lot of the Phillies players, at the time of the Civil War between the American and National League at the turn of the 1900s, they really dominated the scene. They won several pennants and World Series between 1905 and 1914. Then the Federal League came along. Connie Mack broke the team up. Then he had another big winning team around the time O'Doul was playing for the Phillies. And some really good teams from like 27 to 33 or so until, again, he didn't have money and he started taking the team apart. But the Phillies finished behind the A's in attendance, I think, all but 5 years in a 50-year span. While the A's had ups and downs, the Phillies had mostly downs. Between 1918 and 1948, I believe they had one winning season in 31 out of 31 seasons. And they played in the Baker Bowl versus Shibe Park, which was a cutting edge stadium when it was built and opened in 1909. And the Phillies played in a ballpark that a couple of times fell down and killed people that were attending games, you know, and had the famous right field fence that was a joke around the league, and they had goats trimming the outfield. And so I think there's a quote in there about one National League writer talking about the big improvement in the Baker Bowl in 1937 was shiny new nails, replacing the rusty old ones for players to hang their clothes on. And so at one point, the Phillies actually took up Connie Mack's offer to rent Shibe's Park, and they moved down about a mile down the road. And so they were the tenants of the A's from I think 1938, but the A's still outdrew them almost every year, and it was really, at a time when Major League Baseball was starting to have some problems post World War II with attendance. There was, people, young families. There was more competition for the entertainment dollar, and we're starting. And plus, with the antitrust movements, you were having trouble with some of the smaller two-team markets, and Philadelphia is one of those. And one of those teams was going to move, and arguably, if the Phillies hadn't won when they did, at the same time the A's they looked promising for a bit and then kind of collapsed, it might have been the Phillies who moved.
Right.
But they really, because of that, they changed it to a National League town. It was really an American League town prior to that. And, the timing couldn't have been better for them to, in 1944, come up with an owner with money and patience which they had not had for 50 years.
So let's talk about that 49 team where they were looking pretty good, and some of the players who made them pretty good, and then we'll talk about that parallel of 1950 to 64. So 1949, they were coming up. In addition to, you mentioned in the book, the Phillies were the last team to integrate, so we want to throw that in there too, and in terms of how that affected their success.
Well, so the Whiz Kids were largely built by signing their own players. They made a couple trades. They picked up Eddie Waitkus in a trade. They signed Jim Constanti, who was on a minor league contract, and of course he was MVP in 1950. But Robin Roberts, Curt Simmons, Andy Simonic was picked up in a minor league trade, but Stan Lapata, you got Grant Hamner, Willie Jones, Del Ennis, all of those people were signed by the Phillies, quite often to bonus contracts. Curt Simmons was one of the biggest signings of all time, or up to that time of bonus. And in fact, the Phillies decided to sign him, made the final decision to sign him by taking the team on its day off 50 or so miles up the road to play a town team in Egypt, Pennsylvania, with Curt Simmons pitching, giving him a tryout. Now, teams often would go to small towns on their off days, but they were usually days that were tied to, maybe it was a player who was from that town, and it was really publicity venture. This rarely were they tryouts. And Simmons, who was just a week out of high school, battled them to a 4-4 tie with a high school team behind him. And so they did that, and they had success. They were, it worked. And then afterward, after 1950, they kept trying to do that, but they didn't really recognize, or didn't want to recognize, the change in the baseball landscape that the earthquake that happened on April 15, 1947, and really back to October 1945, when and a lot of major league teams exploited that and signed really cheap talent. They didn't have to pay for a lot of the talent out of the Negro Leagues, and the Phillies, for whatever reason, and there's differing opinions as to why, did not do that. And by the time they got around to trying to do that, the Negro Leagues was picked over. It was really 1954 before they even really tried. They had a couple players in 52, and then they didn't have any black players in their minor league system until 1955. And their first black player was in 1957, John Kennedy, who wasn't really given that much of a chance. Meanwhile, they kept trying to do the things they had done in the 40s, which didn't work.
Right.
The farm system didn't produce during the first half of the 50s. And in 57, when they finally had something come out of the farm system, all of the Whiz Kids had bad years. And so they fell short. And so a lot of it, just on a business standpoint, whatever the motivations, whether they were racially motivated or whether it was just saying, hey, we had success this way, we're going to keep doing it that way. I mean, they didn't, after Herb Pennock's death, they didn't have a general manager till 1954, between 1948 and 1954. And I think that hurt them. And so those are kind of the things that kept them from winning. They kept trying to sign bonus babies, except these bonus babies, Tom Casagrande, Red Van Dusen, Mac Burke, where they just didn't work.
Right.
They didn't pan out. And so sometimes you get wedded to a way that you want and you can't make changes. And everybody else was changing and getting better, and they weren't.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was interesting too with no general manager for that many years. Yeah, how can you really be successful if someone's not looking out for the team as a whole?
And it's surprising because especially they went to a general manager structure, because they needed that, and then they stopped doing it.
Really? Yeah. Del Ennis, real quick. Did you know he had a bowling alley in Cheltenham, Pennsylvania?
I did know that. Yeah, I've listened to some interviews of him. I think there was one that Sabre has that's actually was done in his bowling alley.
Is that right? Really?
Yeah.
Because we lived in Cheltenham in the 60s, and we moved. So we were there to 62. So we would walk through backyards, basically up a hill. There was up a hill over a guardrail into a parking lot where there's an Acme and Del Ennis lanes. Just a little. So you knew that. Very good, Dennis. Very good. 50s team, 64 team. Tell everybody what, because that 50s team.
Well, I think all Phillies fans know how 64 turned out. I can't imagine any red-blooded Phillies fan not knowing that, even if they weren't born at that time. Mm-hmm. and so they collapsed at the end. The 50s Phillies team almost did the same thing. They were up 7.5 games with 11 to go, and it went down to the last day. Now, they wouldn't have been eliminated if they lost, but it sure felt like a must-win game because they would have gone into a playoff similar to what Brooklyn did the next year against the Giants. It would have been a 3-game best-of-3 playoff.
Didn't you see where Robin Roberts pitched 3 games in 5 days?
Yeah, I think it was in 6, but yeah, they were down to basically they lost. Well, Kurt Simmons was lost to military duty. His National Guard unit was called active duty, and then Bob Miller had gotten hurt earlier in the year with his back, and then favoring that, he messed up his shoulder the day after Bubba Church was hit in the eye by Ted Kluszewski line drive. So they had lost 3 starting pitchers in about a week, and they were really down to those 2. Just Constanti, who was in some games pitching 8. Can today's fans imagine a relief pitcher going 8, 9, or 10 innings, which he did during that year? And Robin Roberts, who ended up becoming the first 20-game winner the Phillies had since Grover Cleveland Alexander. And
the numbers are crazy.
And you had some amazing stories on that last day. Richie Ashburn, of course, throwing out Cal Abrams at home plate, and a lot of heroics, and any one of which had not happened. And you think about the fluke way that the Dodgers tied that game with a ball that Pee Wee Reese hit that landed on a ledge just out of Del Ennis's reach and spun to a stop. And he had to sit there and watch Reese run around the bases, and he couldn't do anything. He later said he should have thrown his glove at it, and ground rule would have been a triple. But after something like that happens, after everything that had happened the previous 2 weeks, you got to think this just isn't going to happen. And yet they pulled it out in the 9th and 10th inning. I don't want to tell all of it. You need to read the book, but
right, exactly, yes. And as you mentioned, I saw some other interviews, and you said this when we started. When you say the whiz kids, even now, with nobody around on that team anymore, and I don't think it's just Philadelphia; it's the baseball historical community knows this term, the whiz kids. They know
they
it.
Do. And this year is the 75th anniversary of that. It's amazing that it's been that long. And there have been other whiz kids. I mean, the whiz kids nickname itself kind of came from the University of Illinois basketball team in the early 1940s. And so it was kind of popularized there and then kind of taken up by Bob Carpenter We talked about being the fighting Phillies or the whiz kids. So they were kind of interchangeable in that in 50, but over time, really the fighting Phillies, it's still around, but it's really whiz kids that they're known as.
Yeah, I'm so glad I was able to find you, Dennis, and the book. I'm typically somebody who doesn't read a lot of history books, but if it's sports and then obviously the Phillies, I'm going to do it. And I appreciate. I always tell book authors this. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate all the research, especially for this one that you had to do. I love the detail that you give from beginning to end with the games and all the information that you gave us tonight. But there's thousands and thousands of much more information in the book that people need to pick up because it's so interesting to read, to have somebody who took the time to do all of this research and to put it down on paper and then put it into book form. So I appreciate what you've done here.
Thank you.
And I really love the book because it really gave me a good insight into the history of the Phillies. And it's just a fun read. So people need to go get the book. Here it is. I put it out there on Facebook
and my goal is that you can do research and get and do a lot of historical facts and still make it interesting. That's kind of what I try.
No, and that's right. I mean, you were exactly right. It's the numbers, it's the information, but it's all about, to me, the people. Right. And how you put that all together and intertwine all of that stuff to make it a great story.
Well, thank you.
So thank you for that. And Louis, any questions for Dennis?
No, it's fascinating. Again, Robin Roberts hits close to home because I met him here in East Lansing years ago. Oh my God!
University of Michigan star.
Yeah, it was a Michigan State. Oh, make sure you get it right around here.
Michigan State. I'm sorry. You're right.
I mean, I'm a Michigan guy, but I had a chance to meet him years ago. Gosh, it's probably been 30 years ago, and he got his number retired at Michigan State. Well, I think the first ball player to get his number retired on the Spartans, and he had some great players there, Gibson and Garvey, so I read up. I've always known the history of Robin Roberts, and that run he had with the Whiz Kids was just amazing. 28 wins that one year, and just
20 straight complete games. Can you imagine that today?
No,
absolutely.
Gosh, no.
That will never happen again.
There's only 25 complete games so far this year, I think, in the majors. It's insane.
Hey, the Phillies have 2 of them, just so you know.
Well, they could use one tonight. I just saw the flood.
That's over. I mean, the bullpen. So, before you go, Dennis, you were a Phillies fan?
Probably more of a Giants fan.
Well, let's let him go.
I like the Phillies.
Let him go.
Send Verlander back to Detroit, will you?
I'm from Northern California. I can't help it.
Yeah, gotcha. I don't know. They're slipping a little bit too. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, they're not looking like
they're going to make it. I don't think so.
If they acquire a hitter, they stop hitting.
We'll take Verlander off your hands. A little sentimental trip to the World Series for the Tigers.
I think there's people. It's been a rough year for him. I don't want to say too much. It reminds me of the year Robin Roberts had in '61 when he went 1-10. I think of that. The timing of this has made me think of Verlander's having a season kind of like Robin, and Robin bounced back and had several excellent seasons after that.
Yeah, sure did.
We'll see what happens with Verlander. Hey, Dennis, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just awesome information, and really appreciate your patience with that one postponement and coming on tonight. It's been terrific.
And I have to apologize to all Spartans fans. That was I was thinking in terms of Ray Fisher, who was the Michigan coach.
There you go. That's Robin,
right. But definitely Michigan State. There's even a picture of him in the book pitching for Michigan in a Michigan State uniform. So,
all
right, Dennis. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate you.
All right.
Wow, the hour flies by, doesn't it, Mitch?
Man, that was quick.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel.
Well, you were right on Helsley getting traded from the Cardinals to the Mets. I was hoping Detroit would make a play for him, but
I mean,
we'll see by tomorrow what happens.
we'll talk about it tomorrow. Yeah. We'll talk about it, folks, tomorrow. Right, Lou, on another quick
7 o'clock.
extravaganza?
Yep, 7 o'clock. We'll have an extravagant few minutes, and we'll talk about the trade deadline and what it looks like going forward as we head into August.
Yeah, dog days.
Standings.
Dog days.
Yeah. So, all right. Wow. Well, I guess we'll call it a night, shall we?
Next week, former Major League pitcher Don August is
Looking
coming
forward
on.
to that. Can't wait for that. That'll
Talking
be
about
fun.
a book he wrote.
Yeah. Yeah. He's I'll get to talk a little Brewers. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun. All right. Well, that's going to do it then. We want to thank everybody for welcoming us into your homes, on your laptops, iPhones, however you watched us here on the Extravaganza with Captain Lou and Mitch here on the Captain Lou Sports Network. For my tag team partner, Mitch Bernstein, yours truly, Captain Lou, reminding you again, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, we'll have a bonus Extravaganza trade deadline special. We're going to break it all down for you tomorrow night at 7. All right, Mitch, have a good night. And everybody else, keep your heads up, keep your sticks down, keep your feet moving. And as always, keep your minds open. So long, everybody.
Take care. See you tomorrow night.